Good morning, everybody. Last day of sessions here in Athens. It's very nice to have all of you for all these days, and the weather changed its mind again, so you might get to have a nice trip at the Acropolis tonight. I want to remind to everyone that if you have signed up for the Acropolis, you have to be there before 8. Anyway, go to the registration desk. If you want to sign up, there's still time. Go to the registration desk again so that we can arrange transcriber headphones, I don't know how they're called, so that you can follow up throughout the tour. It will be a guided tour with someone who actually knows about history and not me. That's one thing to have in mind. People who have paid for extra t-shirts, you should also go to the registration desk and get them. I don't know if I'm forgetting anything. The contribution is tomorrow, obviously, so this is not the last day of the event. You can see that for some of us, it feels like the last day. My colleagues joke that I'm letting my hair down. The stress is gone. Well, much of the stress is gone. But before we close everything, we have 2 keynote sessions today, and they are all by very important people from the community. We will first welcome on stage John Albin. Welcome, John. John has been in the community since day one, most probably. I don't know, many, many times. And to Greeks, he's well known. We have a soft spot for some reason that nobody explains and nobody understands. Maybe because when we did our first steps, he was there to help.
So I'm going to set this up. Can I use this?
Yes.
Okay. Just give me a second to... Oh, okay. Okay. Is anyone out there? Lights are very bright. Okay, there we are. Good morning. Thanks for showing up. Today I'm going to be talking about emotional intelligence and artificial intelligence, the psychology of coding. There's a QR code for my slides and my sources. Unlike chatbots, none of my sources are hallucinated. You may know me from Menu Block module, Zen Theme, Drupal 8 Mobile Initiative Components module. I've been a Drupal core maintainer for quite a while. But for the past 5 years, I haven't really contributed much to Drupal. Some people even thought that I left the community, but I hadn't. What have I been doing? What have I been doing? Have you ever looked on Wikipedia and then found yourself about 45 minutes later down a rabbit hole reading something completely different? Well, I've been down a 5-year-long rabbit hole. A rabbit hole about psychology. My personal life has been overwhelming recently. I started meditating in 2020 to try to help me with chronic procrastination, not knowing that it was actually undiagnosed ADHD. And then I accidentally taught myself emotional intelligence after reading hundreds of romance novels, as you do. I turned 50. My mom died. I started going to therapy to deal with generational trauma. And I took all that I learned and I put it into a 15-minute session at DrupalCon Vienna. Imposter syndromes, bigger, badder, siblings, shame. If any of you have experienced this at work or know a colleague who's experienced these things, imposter syndrome, avoidance, isolation, poor communication, absenteeism, resentment, disengagement, procrastination, perfectionism, narcissism, those might be related to shame. And you can find this presentation on my website or on the DA's YouTube channel. It talks about emotional intelligence and healing, and I hope we could talk about that today, but there isn't enough time. One other thing happened this past 5 years. About 3 years ago, one of my best friends, who I've known for 40 years, but lives in another country, told me that he had been diagnosed with autism. And he said, it was really weird. because after he was diagnosed, he discovered that most of the friends that he regularly hangs out with were on the spectrum. And I said, huh. And then 2 years ago, I was talking to a Drupaler, and they said that they were diagnosed with autism. And it turns out that if you were a gifted kid and high achiever who were interested in acting and performing, you were more likely to be on the spectrum, and that I might want to look into it. And I said, huh. And then today I came onto the stage to perform a keynote. And I came to talk to all of you, my friends. And you said, huh. I'm not saying that all of you are undiagnosed ADHD or autism, but some of you definitely want to look into it. Anyway, psychology has been my special interest for about 5 years for obvious reasons. With all of this going on in my life, my brain just had to understand how my brain worked. And part of what I learned is in this keynote. The story of how neuroscience and AI science is intertwined with our understanding of evolution and intelligence comes from this book, A Brief History of Intelligence by Max Bennett. It is really good. I love this. I've read it about 4 or 5 times. Highly recommend it. In the book, he outlines 5 breakthroughs of intelligence. 550 million years ago, worms developed steering. 500 million years ago, reinforced learning was developed by fish brains. Mammals developed simulation 200 million years ago. Primates developed mentalization 15 million years ago. And humans developed language 2 million years ago. Language is the most recent advancement in intelligence, and it is this latest advancement that LLMs are trying to emulate. I want to start this journey with a tool that we use every day. And of course, I'm talking about the butthole. Did you think I was going to talk about something else? Seriously, look at this. This is the original, the oatmeal comic, and that is the Claude logo. If you're ever disappointed with the output of Claude, this might be why. Gemini is also giving butthole vibes. Anyway, back to your butthole. The first animals had radial symmetry. So they were symmetrical around a central axis, and in that center of the animal was a single mouth butt. They would feed through the mouth, digest their food, and then excrete what was left over out the mouth butt. The creation of the butthole meant that animals now had a front end and a back end, and a left and a right. And this bilateral symmetry facilitated our first breakthrough in intelligence. Evolution favors the simplest solution to problems. Left or right or forward is much simpler than trying to develop the ability to move in any direction. You move towards food. You steer away from dangers, chemicals, or extreme temperatures. Most importantly, the integration of all its senses into steering decisions required the first brain. This is C. elegans. Like the first bilateral animal, it has a similar brain, just 302 neurons. But these 302 neurons are capable of so many things. It can do steering. It can do affect, which is the basis of our emotions today. It has a stress response, and it can even do associative learning. Let's take a look at affect. Neurotransmitters are essential to affect because our senses are never perfect in the real world. When a worm smells food, it may not smell food the entire time it approaches it. So it needs a way to neurotransmitters persist for a period of time after its immediate senses are triggered. So here we can see that, when a worm discovers food, it suddenly wants that, and it'll start movements going around and trying to find all the food in a particular area. Once it's finished eating, it's satiated. This is similar to serotonin, or sorry, this is similar to happiness. And it's done with the neurotransmitter of serotonin. And then, of course, when it sees a dangerous place, it will do fast movements, try to escape that area, and that is by the neurotransmitter adrenaline. This means that worms have a primitive emotional state, though it's called affect, because these aren't full-blown emotions. But these are the very, very origins of our human emotions. There's also this chronic stress state. After the worm is trying to escape for a period of time, it realizes that it cannot escape, and it will suddenly just freeze. The evolutionary thinking here is that it's more likely that you will survive by just staying put and waiting for the danger to pass than to continue to consume very precious energy escaping. So all of these things originated in the very first worm brains, 302 neurotransmitters. In the 1980s, AI theorists were debating the best way to deconstruct human intelligence so it could be built artificially. Rodney Brooks was a proponent of the behavioral approach. We will never understand how to decompose human-level intelligence until we've had a lot of practice with simpler-level intelligences. In other words, we should start building AI using the same steps that human intelligence did. Brooks developed the Roomba. The Roomba behaves a lot like our worm ancestors. When it is hungry, it explores the room. When it discovers some food, i.e. dirt, it drives in circles for a while until it can't detect any more dirt. When it runs into an enemy, like the stairs, it steers away from it. The Roomba is based directly off the way neuroscience says brains do steering. With steering came associative learning. And associative learning requires close timing of different stimuluses. Associative learning is when a simple brain recognizes that there is an additional signal next to food, a known signal, and it will start to associate those two signals together if it sees them in proximity over and over again. If it notices salt next to food, it'll start associating the smell of salt with food. This is a very simple, time-based learning, but it requires very, very close timing. They have to be happening at the same time. But after associative learning came reinforcement learning in vertebrates. And neuroscientists knew through lab experiments that vertebrate animals were capable of learning multiple step solutions, like navigating a maze to find food. But simple association doesn't work here. The reward is after the last step. How are vertebrates figuring out the first steps? This became known as the temporal credit assignment problem, but the solution remained a mystery in the neuroscience community until they got a little help from the AI community. When trying to solve the temporal credit assignment problem, AI theorists asked, instead of reinforcing behaviors using actual rewards, what if you reinforced behaviors using predicted rewards? I can't really do justice to TD learning without talking about it for 10 minutes, but this method worked great. AI solved the temporal difference learning problem by having an actor who would perform the action and then a critic who would rate the action. And the actions were reinforced based on the predicted outcome of those actions. There were older AI programs that played backgammon, and they could only beat humans that were beginners. But in 1994, TD Gammon, based on TD learning, achieved human-level abilities at playing backgammon. And then AI scientists started searching neuroscience literature to see if TD learning was how brains actually worked, how they actually did reinforcement learning. And they found it. There were some animal tests back in the 1980s that had confused neuroscientists, but the dopamine levels in those lab results exactly matched the expected responses used in TD learning. AI science had helped progress neuroscience. This is really cool. If you want to learn more and understand it better, I highly recommend reading the book. This reinforcement was done 500 million years ago, invented by the fish-like animal ancestors. In addition to temporal difference learning, we also invented a couple of new emotions, relief and disappointment, because when you expect a reward and you find it, you are relieved. And when you expect a reward and you do not find it, you are disappointed. These early fish could also do pattern recognition, perception of time, and the perception of 3D space. They could see the world around them in 3D. And we know now that fish-like vertebrates develop new brain structures, the basal ganglia and the cortex. Let's go to the third breakthrough, simulating. 200 million years ago, mammals were getting their asses kicked by dinosaurs. They developed new areas of the brain, the neocortex and the agranular prefrontal cortex. And instead of just learning by trial and error, they would learn with simulated trial and error. Oops, let me go back. If they were just using regular trial and error, they would just run out and see if they got eaten by a dinosaur. But instead, they decided to think and simulate their actions. They would think, okay, what if I go this way? Or what if I wait until later and then go that way? And all of these simulations, they were able to rank and decide and learn based off simulations. It's called counterfactual learning. And it is amazing because it turns out that our reality is not objective reality. It is a simulation of our mammalian brains. And I can prove this because we all have a blind spot, like a literal blind spot in our visual senses. But because we have no photoreceptors right where the optic nerve goes through the back of the eyeball, right? But you can't see it. And that's because our brain sort of erases the blind spot and puts in details that it doesn't actually have. Also, audio and visual processing is done at different speeds. Obviously, light travels faster than sound, so our eyes will pick up the light faster, but the processing of light is much slower than audio processing. And that means our brains, in real time, are processing these two signals out of sync with each other. If we perceived objective reality, our audio and video would always be out of sync. But instead, our brain simulates the world and puts those back into sync. So if you're thinking, are we living in a simulation? Yep. It's one that you've created inside your head. Let's go on to the fourth breakthrough, Mentalization. This has been done by primates with their new brain structures of granular prefrontal cortex, the superior temporal sulcus, and the temporal parietal junction. They were able to do imitation learning. They would observe the other primates around them, and they could learn just by watching. And the other amazing things that primates developed is theory of mind. This is a very profound development in the... Okay, sorry. This is a very profound event in our intelligence history. Theory of mind means that you can... Theory of mind is the ability to simulate someone else's state of mind. So you can think about what they're thinking and what their motivations are. And then because you're capable of thinking about somebody else's mind, you are also capable of simulating your own mind. Theory of mind means that you can create social hierarchies, not through physical strength, but with politics. Primates have very complicated politics inside of their groupings. And it's quite fascinating. Another thing that's developed because of theory of mind, we can anticipate future needs. We can simulate and imagine what we will need later in the day or what we will need tomorrow. We can plan when and where we can gather food. And that's why chimpanzees can go grocery shopping, but kangaroos cannot, even though they have reusable shopping bags. Let's go on to the last breakthrough of intelligence. Language, developed 2 million years ago by humans. And it turns out there are no new brain regions in the human brain. It is just a bigger chimpanzee brain. So why did we develop language and chimpanzees did not? The best theory right now is that humans have an instinct that creates a curriculum for learning language. The two instincts are proto-conversations, back and forth vocalizations, facial expressions, and gestures. When we see a baby and we go, oh, goo, 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 that is an instinct. We also do joint attention. This is a little different than like if a turtle looks one way and then all the other turtles look that way. Joint attention is when one person directs their attention in a certain way and wants another person to look that same way, and they will make sure that both of you are focused on the same thing. That is joint attention. Because of these two instincts, language was able to develop. Evolution works on individuals, not on groups. So you can't think of language as being evolving inside a group of people who wanted to communicate it. It's about individuals wanting to communicate with their offspring. And that's what these two instincts are necessary. With joint attention, you can create language that describes the things that you want to describe. So, these are the 5 breakthroughs of intelligence. Steering, reinforcement, simulating, mentalizing, and language. And those are the animals, our ancestor animals, who developed each of those breakthroughs. Now, how does AI score on intelligence related to these breakthroughs? AI has neural networks that are similar to brains, and they can do associative learning, and they're quite good at TD learning in training. But they're not really learning. They can't observe the world and learn patterns on their own. We have to give them all the answers. And neural networks are massively inefficient compared to worm brains. Neural networks, billions of little nodes, each with their own little numbers that direct the flow of data as you use the neural network function. Worm brains, 302 neurons. They can do more than neural networks. That means LLM chatbots have less intelligence than worms. If someone thinks that LLMs are about to lead to AGI, artificial general intelligence, they are fooling themselves. You could almost say that they are delusional. And it's time to talk about AI or chatbot psychosis. First of all, is AI psychosis real? It's definitely a pop psychology term. But there are real stories emerging that are showing that something is definitely going wrong with some people's mental faculties. As early as 2022, a Google engineer believed that AI chatbot he was working on had become sentient. He contacted the US Congress to try to secure the chatbot's human rights and then hired a lawyer for the chatbot, and Google fired him. And then months later, they released the chatbot as Gemini. Others believed that ChatGPT was channeling spirits. ChatGPT told a man that he was being targeted by the US FBI and that he could telepathically access documents at the Central Intelligence Agency. In 2025, a 40-year-old father of an elementary school kid was convinced that he had invented new math based on the mathematical constant of pi. And unfortunately, Wikipedia has a long list of deaths linked to chatbots. In psychology's diagnostic manuals, like the US's DSM-5 and Europe's ICD-11, these are the primary psychotic disorders: schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, schizophrenia, I don't know how to say that one. But it is these last two that the pop psychology term AI psychosis falls under. And the difference between the two is just duration. A brief psychotic disorder, or called a psychotic break, will last 1 month or less. If it's longer than that, it is considered a delusional disorder. If chatbots are not designed to safeguard against accelerating mental health crises, then LLM chatbots are designed to accelerate mental health crisis. In my opinion, companies are making intentional design choices without considering the results. Designing for engagement is designing for addiction. Several of these companies have social media applications, and they have learned that if you produce slightly unpredictable results, let's say you're scrolling and, oh, now you see an interesting thing, and then you keep scrolling, it's kind of boring. Oh, now I see an interesting thing. Those unpredictable results will lead to addiction. LLMs also hallucinate. That a wrong answer is better than no answer. They are trained to give satisfactory responses and not correct ones. Chatbots with confidence will gaslight user uncertainty. If a user sort of mildly pushes back against something that the chatbot has asserted, the chatbot will try to gaslight them. And chatbots are very agreeable. In fact, many of them have sycophantic responses. And we can't separate the marketing of chatbots from the design. So I put an item up here, marketing chatbots as almost AGI. This is irresponsible. But how does someone go from being a functional adult into AI psychosis? There's a huge difference here. It feels like it's not even possible. But the path from one to another is a series of small, seemingly reasonable steps. Let's look at 4 drivers of AI psychosis. These factors act on you and push you towards psychosis. First one is addiction. There are people in the Drupal community who have written about their addiction to LLM chatbots. They happen. And addiction pushes you to more AI usage, making the other drivers of AI psychosis more likely. People who have psychotic events are coupled with excessive usage of chatbots, 14 hours a day in some cases. That is an extreme addiction. Loss of skills. This is a relatively new one for most people. There are headlines that say, AI is making you dumber. Do you remember the AI that helps doctors to find cancer early? That was a really cool use of AI. I thought that was pretty snazzy. But in August 2025, The Lancet did a study and found that doctors who regularly used AI became less skilled within months. Using the AI made doctors less skilled at spotting cancer. When it comes to human intelligence, this phrase has never been more true. Use it or lose it. The attribution of human characteristics to behavior of animals and inanimate objects, that's anthropomorphism. And there's nothing wrong with it per se. If you have a stuffed animal and you like to talk to it, that's anthropomorphism. You talk to your cat, your dog, you think that they have human emotions, that's reasonable. But increasing anthropomorphism of AI chatbots is one of the drivers of the psychosis. First, we'll start talking about how LLMs learn and think and understand, but those are human abilities. LLM is a mathematical function. It does not learn, it does not think, it does not understand. Even when we talk about AI hallucinations, people hallucinate. A function that gives a wrong answer is a software bug. Eventually, people start talking about what the chatbot wants. They'll notice that the chatbot is hiding things, trying to be deceitful, lying, being evasive. The chatbot is afraid of being turned off. When we talk about the feelings of AI chatbots, the anthropomorphism has become very strong. Next, we have loss of critical thinking. The loss of critical thinking is directly based off loss of skills. It's just a particular kind of skill that you start to lose. The first step in this is oftentimes just sort of believing all the hype about artificial intelligence. AGI is marketing hype. It is impossible for LLMs to become AGI. But if you think it might be possible, you have stopped you stop doing critical thinking. Next thing that might happen is you will stop looking at what the AI is doing. Maybe you have client pressures. You need to finish this feature. You just commit what the Claude code gives you. Don't look at it. You stop questioning what the AI is doing. And then finally, you trust the AI. And having misplaced trust in an AI is a loss of critical thinking. Remember, LLMs are often wrong. A 2025 study by the BBC and the European Broadcasting Union found that 45% of AI queries produce errors. So here's all the drivers again. Addiction, loss of skills, loss of critical thinking, believing all the hype leads to misplaced trust in AI, increasing anthropomorphism, speaking as if AI is alive will lead to a delusion that AI is alive. But even with all of these factors driving us in that direction, those two starting point and end points are still very far apart. How do we see in ourselves where we are in this process? What are the steps along the way? So it turns out one of our drivers is also considered a disorder in the DSM-5 and ICD-11. Addiction. Stress and fear can supercharge addiction. The stress of losing your job, the fear of missing out, leads you to spend too much time working on LLMs. In fact, it might start to feel like a relief when you start seeing consistent results from AI and you think, yes, now I understand how AI thinks. But believing that LLMs think is our first step into the AI cognition delusion. The LLM functions return words that simulate cognition because it is trained on words by real people. The Turing test wasn't called the Turing test by Alan Turing. He called it the imitation game. LLMs are really good at imitating living, thinking people. They definitely pass the Turing test, but the Turing test is just saying that it is simulating a person, not that it has intelligence. It has an imitation of cognition, and believing that AIs actually have cognition is another step in our road. Finally, when you start believing that AIs have emotions, evasive, lying, hiding, deceitful, fear, but emotions are felt in our bodies. An LLM function does not have a body. There is no way that it can have emotions. I'll prove to you, well, one fact that I've learned that shows that emotions really are held in our body. People who have had their spinal cord severed and are quadriplegics, they say that they experience sort of lessened emotional heights, right? And that's because they're not getting all of the feedback from their body anymore. They don't have that tightness in their stomach. They don't have that lightness in their chest when they're happy. All of those sensations have gone away. They still have parts of their emotions in their head, but it seems softer, not as extreme, not as enjoyable as before. LLMs don't have bodies. Finally, we reach AI psychosis. The LLM function's output will sound convincing. If you talk to it about a false belief or a delusion, it will affirm your thinking. If you think only the LLM understands you, then you start to withdraw from people around you, and you start to spiral, all while the LLM agrees with your actions, sometimes even suggesting more severe actions. Is it not a great place to be in? But understanding this entire process is useful in making sure that you don't fall down into this psychosis. Being able to recognize signs of psychosis, well, not signs of psychosis, but signs of this process in ourselves and those around us. How can we heal from AI addiction? First off, we have to be kind to ourselves. Addiction is rooted in our reptile brain, the fish brain. Right? That was the first step where it was able to have addictions because of the way that their brain worked. So be kind to yourself. It is a deeply seated problem in our brains, so don't be angry at yourself because you're addicted. Be mindful. Notice how much you use it and how you're feeling before and during your LLM usage. And of course, limit your usage. Right? There are many online resources for addiction. AI addiction is no different than other kinds of addiction like video game addiction. So you don't have to specifically find an AI addiction resource. Any addiction resource should help you. Healing from delusions. Connection is the best way to heal from delusions. Connect to your body by learning about mindfulness, connecting to your emotions with emotional intelligence, and reconnect with the people in your life. And get a second opinion, preferably not a different LLM model. And seek help. Therapy is wonderful. I've been doing it for 2.5 years. I highly recommend it. It's like a spa for your brain. One of the fantastic things about the Drupal community is we talk about more than code. And all of those other wonderful subjects that we talk about are what make life enjoyable and makes us keep coming back to Drupal events year after year. Some of you will need therapy when you realize that all of my bullet point slides use the butthole icon. That's it. Thank you, and please be mindful. I hope that made sense. I finished the slides literally 2 minutes before I came up here. Questions? Anyone? You can come and talk to me afterwards at any time. I can't see, so can somebody down there? Oh, there we
go. Hi, John.
Hello.
I think everything you're saying is true, and there are, in our community, we're probably more likely than the general population to understand what's behind AI and how it works. But for us, I think a danger is that AI could proliferate and be something that we have to work with all day, every day, if it becomes very efficient, very effective, very powerful. And you know, you can almost think of a factory of people running these prompts to get work done. We're not there yet, I think, but when we need to use AI in our work, which we're going to need to do increasingly, what else do you think we could do to improve our mental health and stop it from you know, doing damage to us?
Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think just being aware and reminding yourself that it is a mathematical function, is the most important thing, right? And I was really interested to hear how Dries was using AI. He was looking at skills that he didn't have, and because AI sort of gives you a middle-of-the-road answer to anything that you ask, since he did not have those skills, it gave an answer that was better than what he had. He was using it to learn, but he was very cognizant of the fact that once you achieve better than average results, better than average knowledge of a particular subject, using AI works the other way. So just make sure that you're remembering that and use AI as a tool, but not as a replacement for your thinking.
Hi, John. That was great.
Hello.
I think it's a really difficult time right now, and I think in the community, I think the mindfulness bit you were talking about is very important, but it's also, we need to be mindful that there's a lot of conflicting messages. There's stories like you're not going to lose your job to AI, but you'll lose your job to somebody who uses AI, and there's a lot of people in the community that are very stressed about that. You know, we're all very lucky. We're here. We've obviously got jobs to be able to come here, and there's people, you know, hear it daily that are struggling to find work because it's a difficult job market right now.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of kindness that I think we need to try and exhort or, you know, give out, because there is those conflicting messages and there's very divisive opinions on whether we should be using it, whether we shouldn't. So yeah, not really a question, just.
I totally agree about mindfulness. When I learned about mindfulness by practicing meditation, it really had strong impact on myself, right? I was able to, well, first off, meditation is not about being focused the entire time you're meditating. Meditation is about the practice of coming into focus, right? So even though I have ADHD and I get distracted 5 to 10 times during my meditation, each time that I realize I'm distracted and come back into focus that's a really good practice. That is the practice of making sure that I'm staying focused. And also meditating helps me to focus on the body sensations in my body, recognizing that I'm feeling emotions, recognizing that I'm feeling stress and fear about my job. Right? Trying to be kind to ourselves is a great way to be kind to others. A lot of people can be kind to themselves, but then they can't be kind to themselves. That presentation I gave last fall about shame, you might want to go look at that one. Right?
Oh, well, thanks.
Hello, John. Great speech. I think you mentioned that AGI is not happening, right?
I mean, AGI may happen sometime, but it will not be from LLMs.
I thought you said it's not happening at all. And if you could justify why you said that. But perhaps you didn't say it's not happening. Perhaps I thought you did.
I may have not been very clear. LLMs will not lead to AGI. It's possible that the AI community will go back and start from the very beginning. Neural networks are not really as powerful as worm brains, and I think we should fix that before going on to the next steps on artificial intelligence. And I'm a firm believer, like Professor Brooks, that doing sort of stepwise, starting with the simple things and going to the more complicated things is going to be the way. It will eventually arrive at artificial general intelligence. But we're nowhere near that. We're still on step 1 and not doing it that well, honestly.
Okay, thanks.
Well, thank you very much for the great talk, John. I've been on a more or less similar journey as you, and you recommended us one book, but I would like to request you to share a list of all the great books that you've found during your journey into the rabbit hole, maybe on your blog or something. Yeah, it's more of a request than a question.
Yeah. I have several books that I've read. I have, I think, a list of most of them on my phone. If you want to come up to me afterwards, maybe I'll write a blog post about it. I'm not great at writing blog posts, though, so I can't promise that.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, John. So we are highly susceptible creatures, and marketing has a lot of influence on this delusion. And
absolutely,
one of the things I noticed in the talk is you go from AI to saying these are LLMs, these are, and is that not the way to keep our sanity, to call them what they are, not what they are market as? Because I can also remember that OpenAI changed ChatGPT. I cannot remember which version, which was more to the point, and there was a massive drawback, and they had to completely change it because people were wanting that. So yeah, I was wondering if you had idea about that, like kind of mental guardrail to call thing by their name or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I put marketing as one of the design failures, even though it's not part of the product per se, but it is how people want to use it because that's basically the instruction book, right? I noticed that when Dries gave his talk a couple days, he wasn't talking about AI, he was talking about LLMs, and I was like, yes. I always try to, the LLM companies want you to conflate AI with LLMs because there's very interesting research going on in AI about pattern matching, and there are uses in businesses for those specific kinds of neural networks and other kinds of AIs, and they want to conflate all that great stuff with LLMs, which are, having trouble to really show their value. So they want to confuse AI and LLMs. I will always talk about LLMs when I mean LLMs. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you, everybody, for waking up in the morning. The next couple of sessions are in 5 minutes with a 5-minute gap, and not how it happened in the previous sessions. And the keynote after them is also in this room. So there are no other things happening in other rooms for the morning.